Welcome to the Grow Your Business and Grow Your Wealth podcast with Gary Helt. Gary is an expert in helping business owners put together a plan that will provide a better future for their businesses, themselves, and their families. On the podcast, Gary interviews other professionals who share his vision, and together they share secrets and strategies any business owner can use to build a better financial foundation for your business and your life.
Investment advisory services offered through Brookstone Wealth Advisors, LLC, a registered investment advisor and affiliate of Brookstone Capital Management, LLC, and Pacific Group Advisors are independent of each other. Insurance products and services are not offered through BWA, but are offered and sold through individual licensed and appointed agents. Information provided is not intended as tax or legal advice and should not be relied on as such. You are encouraged to seek tax or legal advice from an independent professional. The opinions expressed by Eli Mizrahi and guests on the show are their own and do not reflect the opinions of this podcast. All statements and opinions expressed are based upon information considered reliable, although it should not be relied upon as such. Any statements or opinions are subject to change without notice. Investments involve risk and, unless otherwise stated, are not guaranteed. Past performance cannot be used as an indicator to determine future results. Any strategies mentioned may not be suitable for everyone. Information expressed does not take into account your specific situation or objectives and is not intended as recommendations appropriate for you. Before acting on any information mentioned, please consult with a qualified tax or investment advisor to determine if it's suitable for your specific situation. This program is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information with regard to subject covered.
Welcome to my podcast, Lucas. I think you got a lot of exciting things there in your background that I'd love to investigate you on, but we'll try to have some professional stuff on it too.
Yeah, sure. Glad to be here.
Yes, I'm glad that we're able to do that. And that should be about half hour. I see that you've had a lot of experience for a young fella. You started with a big firm, right? And how did that shape your approach?
I think working at a big company like Deloitte or Ernst & Young or any other big four is you just get a very broad experience. You're working with the biggest companies. Starting my own practice and being very much down in the weeds with clients and seeing the TDM and the business model, but then being able to take all the things I learned about reviewing financial statements and the high level approach from my corporate side and really using that as a way to guide small businesses to really focus in on their business model and understand, like, okay, is this a viable business model? How do I optimize and how do I improve the function? Where I really come in as someone who's very tech enabled myself and my practice and trying to use the best platforms.
They'll learn from you.
Yeah, well, what I find, right, is like you see it at Deloitte where the client would send me their general ledger and I would take their accounting records and I would put it into my system. And then I would have questions and I'd go back to them, talk to the tax director. They would answer the questions, right? What we're seeing is that you can integrate these things. Your accounting system of record should be directly connected to your tax filing software, and the amount of middlemen, the amount of managers and accounting and tax professionals that we need now is very reduced. And so you're seeing that across the board with how young people are no longer getting their CPA license, right? Because they are like, oh, this is all going to get automated. Yeah. And true, but not really true. We need so many talented people in this field. And so I teach college, or I guest lecture at various college courses, try to encourage young people to get into this field. But I think that starting at a big public accounting company, you know what you sign up for now. There's no mystery behind it anymore. And that's another reason I think young people aren't excited about the industry. But that experience you get is invaluable. And then the opportunities, right, to move from, I started in corporate tech in San Jose, and I was working with startups. I was working with biotech. I was working with big established, super micro computers,
companies,
right? Kind of like an NVIDIA, similar chip maker. And then, moving up through that from corporate tax into provisions and mergers and acquisitions. I mean, I just can't speak enough of the benefits of being at a big firm or even a regional firm. You just touch so many returns. You get to see so many companies that it's really allowed me the expertise and the skill to serve any kind of client that comes across my door. Like this morning, I got an R&D tax credit email. And it's like, hey, would you consider partnering with us? We do a lot of these R&D tax credits. And it's like, okay, well, are you looking for someone to do the studies? Do you just need me to file the form? Like that's a part of the tax return. I wasn't a part of our R&D group, but I worked with those people because in tech, there was R&D credit. I found that the 5 years of experience I got with Deloitte, the opportunities I had really just benefited me and allowed me to be able to, even though I'm a sole proprietor, you're seeing LDC Financial, it's an entirety right here in front of you. And, again, that's why I use technology and software platforms that allow me to minimize the busy work. So, yeah.
So would you be considered to be like a forensic accountant, sort of, kind of?
I would consider myself a CPA, which is, again, I
And
command.
so what made you want to open your own shop?
Well, I get to be a digital nomad. I have complete freedom. I get to choose who I work with. I mean, there's so many benefits. I would encourage anyone that's currently a CPA in the field to potentially consider it. I mean, entrepreneurs are entrepreneurs and they will do this regardless of what industry they're in. But if you're bold enough to take the risk, I think there's a lot of upside.
If you read the Entrepreneur's Roller Coaster from Darren Hardy, the ex-publisher of Success Magazine.
Okay, that's a good one?
You can sign up for his little podcast, a 5-minute a day. It's called Darren Daily. Darren Hardy is his name. You can check on him. Pretty well known, and it's just common sense, very good stuff for entrepreneurs. People
The
who wanna,
Entrepreneur Roller Coaster. Okay, so
got a few books.
I have this app, Libby, and it's a library card app. And so I can just borrow this from the library right now. It's only 7 hours. I listen to it on 2x speed. So we'll download that information and we'll see what Darren has to say.
Yeah, he's a good one. I've read some pretty interesting books on different subjects, but I like your story about deciding to take off and go to, what made you want to go to Antarctica? I guess India, you didn't have a choice, right? You were sent. But how about
No, I did have a choice. I was getting promoted to the mergers and acquisitions group, and they said, is there anything you want to do in our core business service group before we promote you? And I said, yes, I'd like to go to India. They said, okay, we'll rubber stamp anything. So they sent me over there for 3 months during the deadest season, October to December. And I just loved life, got to meet and share presence with a lot of my coworkers out there and just get to see that beautiful country and really just experience India from the 5-star hotel Deloitte experience to the backpacker. Met a lot of my brothers and sisters from the United Kingdom. Obviously, they're going over there quite a bit. So it was a really beautiful trip and beautiful country. But having traveled before I started my career, that really kind of motivated this idea of, okay, I want to take a gap year. I met too many UK and German citizens and Australian citizens who couldn't speak more highly of taking a gap year, and their education system is a little bit different and enables them to do, or maybe their minimum wage. There's a lot of the confluence of factors. But I said, okay, I want to take a gap year, but I'm going to need to work for 5 years and save money and invest in Bitcoin and do, what I need to do to get my piece. And from smart investing to making money and living a low-cost lifestyle, I was able to take 2 years off to travel the world. And the big kind of impetus and driver of that was to go see Antarctica, which was really motivated by climate change. So, you can just see it in the photos when you go down there. It's like, oh yeah, like we're losing a lot of ice, and it shapes the
ocean
ecosystem.
currents are very scary for me. What's going to happen when it reverses? But the current administration, good or bad, they don't believe in climate change. So
it's happening, and around Washington State is only going to continue to find more and more climate refugees moving here. It's a beautiful place, and cat's out of the bag. We're seeing it in the real estate costs. It'll be interesting to see how people continue to migrate and flow around this world as climate change picks up steam.
This will date me a little bit. When I was growing up, when I was in high school, Mount Kilimanjaro had ice cap on it. Not much left now.
Yeah.
So you've worked a lot with large companies, biotech, gaming, all that other stuff. But you also do now something that short-term rentals and one of George Washington's former homes. What's that all about?
Yeah, so that was my very first client, and it was more of a bookkeeping, like, hey, I need someone to do the QuickBooks. So it was very low billing rate. I think I was somewhere around like $65 an hour, but I was living in Argentina at the time, man. And the internet's a crazy thing. I just get on to the
It'll be anywhere.
Washington Secretary of State website. I register an LLC. Bing, bang, boom. I had moved my CPA license already from California to Washington. So I was locked and loaded. This guy had met this gentleman at a country club, classic story. He had $2 million. He buys this house that was formerly owned by George Washington, had it on the deed. And there was 8 bedrooms and they were short-term rentaling it. And I was just kind of doing the bookkeeping, but that got me into QuickBooks. That got me into setting up the automated rules. Okay. Like every bill we have from, Virginia Light and Water or whatever, I was able to kind of set up the rules, and it's like, oh, now the bookkeeping is doing itself. And now I'm just going to bill you a set fee of $350 a month, and it only takes me an hour. Right.
You
So
get a few of those and you got a cash cow there.
yeah. I was in Argentina in 2019 when I set this up, and I got the client in like May. They finally got renters by like July, and we had a good, like increase in rentals through October. And then it's like November, December, it's slowing down. January, February, it's like, okay, like we've got a ton of bookings for March. Like, let's go. And then, COVID hit. And
Oh, yeah.
the owner subsequently sold the building for a tidy $600,000 profit.
How long did you hang on to it for that profit?
I think it ended up being like 2 years, 2 or 3 years.
That's right. That's being independent is a good thing. So when you deal with the cannabis companies here, it's a cash only business. What are the challenges? How can you help them? What do you do for them as far as taxes, and how do they manage their monies? And
Yeah, cannabis is super interesting, and I get to put together a lot of my skill sets. So I really love the industry, but I really hate the industry from a business perspective, because it's a great business if you want to lose money. It's not a great business if you want to make money. If you want phantom income allocations that you're paying taxes on, but you're not actually getting any cash distributions, I'd recommend you get into cannabis. So why I like it,
but there's a
though,
lot of money in it.
I would say that the retailers, those that are selling, they kind of hold the market captive. The producer processors I work with, a lot of those producer processor licenses are going under. And in Washington State, we were one of the first to the starting line. We approved a 43% excise tax, just a completely onerous excise tax on this industry, really crippling it. And if it ever becomes legal federally or descheduled, there's going to be a reckoning in this industry where every state has set up their own esoteric set of rules. And there's going to have to be a leveling across the board as intrastate commerce becomes legal, because it doesn't make sense to grow a ton of cannabis in Maine, right? When you can grow that cannabis for a tenth of the cost in California or Florida. We're not there yet, but that's coming. What I will say, though, in terms of my skill set, is like your GAAP accounting has to match your tax filing. And you can't take any accelerated deductions. You can't take any deductions in general because of 280E. So you kind of have to do this managerial accounting to put everything that you can into cost of goods sold. So it's kind of like a fun, very technically challenging puzzle that requires a lot of tax technical research, but also like very strong GAAP knowledge. And so having that corporate background, financial statement,
I can
and
see that.
GAAP, working closely with my audit teams, I was able to kind of put together a lot of my skill sets. And then, blood is in the water a little bit. There was, for a while at the end of Joe Biden's presidency, some takes on whether it would go legal. And so the M&A people were starting to circle, right? They're like, oh yeah, like let's throw some money at this. But
The challenges with the M&A, tax diligence.
yeah, I mean, again, the nice thing is that the only really viable structure in cannabis is a C corp. So that like simplifies things. Partnerships and S corps can get very complicated, and C corps are so much easier and clean. But yeah, the big thing with the C corp is the qualified small business stock, and how can I potentially or get that $10 million exemption on the sale of stock. And so, I mean, there's some fun technical aspects. Even I have an S corp right now, and I was talking to a tax lawyer about doing a reorganization that issues new stock, and that new stock could potentially qualify the qualified small business stock exemption. So there's some fun things on the M&A side. And, definitely as a CPA, I try to stay in my lane and pull in those LLMs or tax attorneys to help support everything I do. I mean, you don't just do an M&A transaction with a CPA. So
If I get it right, you work with the growers mostly. If I go down street to the dispensary to get something to help my wife with her pain, she's got some issues, that's not your clientele, right?
no, I work with retailers, and I work with producer processors. They have separate license in Washington. And again, because each state has its own esoteric set of laws, like I have been working primarily with Washington state growers and retailers. But I helped, there was a client that was looking to potentially get access to the New York market when New York was giving out licenses. If you had a prior conviction in New York, they were like prioritizing you for 50% of the licenses. So I did some business model building and trying to validate what they were trying to set up. I am a member of the Cannabis Alliance, a Washington-based nonprofit, and I went to MJ BizCon in Vegas, which is an international cannabis business owner get together.
So did your experience in Puerto Rico help here? I mean, is there any correlation at all?
I had a cannabis digital marketing company that I got connected with through some accounting contract work I was doing. And they were based in California, and the founder was relocating to Puerto Rico because he was selling his company for a couple million and was trying to defer or to minimize taxes out. So I worked with a lawyer in Puerto Rico and a lawyer in California, and I would build the structure deck at Deloitte to validate the transaction. So that's what I did in this case, was set up a structure deck of here's how the reorg's going to be. And then even working through that 0% corporate tax rate in Puerto Rico, there's a certain amount of days you got to live there and residency requirements. But it's always fun to dive into the minutia. And, in this case in particular, it was a very tax motivated client. We like to say, like, don't let the tax tail wag the dog. You got to do what you need to do for your business. You shouldn't be letting the tax control. Yeah. But this client was more in the headspace where they wanted tax to be kind of a driving force. And so they decided to relocate to Puerto Rico.
So they might have had different businesses that, not just this business.
This client did recently reach out to me for another transaction. So, it's funny how kind of the work comes in cycles like that. But I think some of these M&A and entrepreneur types, they just try to be in constant cycles of starting new companies and selling them. And so living in a tax advantage location probably makes sense for them.
Serial entrepreneurs. So you've been around for a while. What common mistakes do you see that businesses make in their accounting, and how can you teach them to avoid some of those things?
I have a lot of clients reach out to me that have 5-6 years of past due tax returns. So that already is like multiple thousands of dollars for me to just touch that. So I would advise obviously not letting that happen. On the business side, I would say that a lot of startups are scrappy, right? And so they're trying to save money. So one way they do that is by doing their own accounting or having a bookkeeper.
That costs them a lot more.
Yeah, it turns out a bookkeeper is a very low threshold. You hardly need any kind of certification to say you're a bookkeeper. Whereas I went to a lot of technical training and worked under a CPA, worked at a public accounting company. So when I get in, the first thing I do is charge them a couple $1,000s to do a chart of accounts reorganization, even having like chart of accounts where it's like customer names are in their account structure. Just certain things where it's not GAAP accounting or just poorly organized. If you're trying to start a business and you're serious about it, make sure you're properly capitalized and bring in a CPA to be your partner in this, because a CPA is going to be invaluable to you. If you set up a good operating model, it can operate with very little effort. But if it's poorly set up, it can be hours and hours of your life every month to just get it to give you the report. So yeah, I'll always bring in a CPA, if you can afford it. And even if you can't afford it, it'll be worth it. And then the goal is to not just file your tax return and look at the past, but to look into the future and start doing fractional CFO type of work and support. So yeah, I mean, that's where the industry is heading. You see it with new software platforms like puzzle.io. It's a QuickBooks competitor, and just the dashboard is just so much more what you would want as a business owner without having to like dive into the minutia of your QuickBooks reports.
Just stole my next question about, where the industry is evolving and where it's going to. So does that mean you will need less CPA intervention if you do more of that app-based work, or you just need the CPA to set it up and then it just takes care of itself, or do you need somebody hands-on?
Yeah, I mean, I always prefer working with companies that have a bookkeeper or an internal person that is monitoring and taking care of the day-to-day accounting. Again, I work with small business owners who are willing to hold that piece and wear that hat. And I think that that's fine with the way that software and these automated rules work, is it's not a super onerous. Again, like I once had a dream of getting a billboard, and the billboard just says, fire your tax department, right? Or fire your accounting department. And it's like the billboard for an accounting software company.
Be careful, there was a guy with a grin like that, they shot him. Martin Luther.
Yeah. And CEOs of healthcare companies. So you gotta, again, I try to project good energy and I try to give more than I take. So I think that there's reasons that there's unrest, but we don't need to get into that.
I love your vibe. I just like the way you present yourself, and they're very personable. I like that very much. You've had a lot of experience. That's amazing. Hopefully we can lure you in for another podcast sometime in the future, delve into some other issues. I'm in the financial planning and advising industry, so I don't deal with the kind of stuff you deal with. Most of my clients, if they are businesses, what services we can offer that prevent them from or save them on taxes and stuff like that. And most of the time I deal with families who would like to retire someday, and how do they do it without being dinged so hard with the taxes. So quite interesting. I appreciate that. Is there anything you want to ask me or anything you want to add that I didn't ask?
Yeah. I guess just to circle back about firing your tax department, I would say that, again, it's more like what we're seeing in the industry is a reduced headcount. More and more people are being asked to do more with less resources, especially on the headcount side. And so I think that's where the trend is we're seeing technology kind of fill that gap. And so I'm not saying to move forward without the proper advice and support. What I'm saying is what that proper advice and support looks like is evolving to be a potentially smaller, more tech-enabled, more automated source.
I don't see technology entirely replacing us humans yet, because it can't think for itself. I mean, you got to feed it stuff, right? And if you feed them the wrong stuff, you'll
garbage in,
get what you feed in, right? Yeah.
So that's my 2 cents on the trend here, but I'd be curious, what are you seeing on your side? What trends are you seeing in terms of financial advising? And, you mentioned clients getting older, retiring, trying to do so in a tax efficient manner. What other trends are you noticing?
So we look at, people have highly appreciated stocks. How can they transition without getting dinged? People are trying to get out of real estate again. How can we move it to a different thing that will allow them to get the income, but not having to go unplug that toilet at midnight on Christmas? As far as businesses, how can we make it more efficient that the money they have to keep on the sidelines still works for them and is accessible? We are concerned about the tax structure that's going to happen because of the huge national debt we have. It's going to have to change someday, no matter what politicians say. And so facing that, how do we have more tax favored way to get income when you retire, and how not to run out of money before you run out of life? So that's one of the big concerns, because when I started in this industry, 1 in 4 people might have needed long-term care when they get older. Now it's 7 out of 10. And just like you said, you teach. I enjoy teaching in UW Bothell and in Renton Tech. And one other thing is that nowadays, 7 out of 10 people need care. Before we part, if you can tell people how to get a hold of you, what's the easiest way?
Yeah, my website, ldc.financial, is pretty easy to connect with me. You can just send me a message through there, or you can email me at lucas@ldc.financial. The email is probably the best way. Through the website, it does go through my email, but it gets into like a subfolder. So those are the best 2 ways. I'd be curious though, if we have time for one more question, Eli. I again came into the crypto industry in 2016. It was a fortuitous time, and it really has enabled my financial freedom and my ability to pseudo retire and live my life as a free person, free from a corporate servitude. But I know that the financial industry has been very hesitant to even advise 2%. Like they don't even advise their clients to dip a toe in the water. Whereas I've been putting a lot of money in my Roth IRA into these new Bitcoin related ETFs. So I'd just be
I just
curious if
did
you're
some for
looking at
myself.
this and if you talk with clients about this at all.
It does not come in the conversation strictly because I don't think most advisors are comfortable with that, and most people, they don't know anything about it. So actually, if you don't mind, we can hop on a phone conversation, go over that. I got a interesting situation I'm looking at that I think either it's the worst scam or the best scam in the world, or it's really something good. So I'd like to get your 2 cents on that. I appreciate your time. This was quite illuminating. And as I said, hopefully we can drag you back in another time or two in the future. Other than that, I'll give you a call. We can talk some off the air.
Yeah.
And hopefully you enjoy where you live, as I do. I love
Yeah.
this
Very much.
area. Beautiful. I mean, you get out of my door, you can bike, hike, go skiing, go down to the lake. Can't beat that.
No, you can't beat that.
Sometimes we get liquid sunshine, but that's okay.
Yeah. Yep.
I've been all over the world. This is still by far one of the best, if not the best places. Do we have problems? Yes, we do. But it is what it is.
Yeah.
Thanks again, Lucas. I'll talk to you soon.
Yep. Thank you, Eli. Appreciate it.
All right. Bye-bye.
"49 Faces looked to him in triumph. Over the last 12 months, they had each taken turns and promoted his business for a week at a time, driving over $987,342 in revenue. What if you had a network of 50 centers of influence who promoted your business every week for a year? Grab your copy of the #1 Amazon best-selling book, The Ultimate Guide to Growing Your Business with a Podcast, at 33% off the Amazon price by going to ultimatepodcastbook.com. Again, that website for 33% off the Amazon price is ultimatepodcastbook.com.